How we doing, folks? My guest today is going to be Ann Battelle. Ann is one of the most decorated winter athletes of all time. She was a four-time Olympian. She went to 7 world championships. She won world championships in 1999. She had 5 World Cup wins, 21 World Cup podiums. She was a 6-time national champion, and she won the World Cup overall title in 1999 and 2000 as well. And in this episode today, we discuss Ann's career. We talk about some of those lows, and we talk about certainly the highs and what she did to achieve her best. Ann got a later start than most when it comes to competitive skiing. She didn't start until she was 21. So we talk about that and really go in depth on her career and some of the setbacks and the perseverance that she's had and what really drove her to be her best. I hope you folks enjoy this episode. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks. That's the buzzer. And thank you so much for taking the time and coming on. Really do appreciate it. We've been talking about this for quite a long time, so I'm glad we're finally able to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to be here and talk to you a little bit. We've talked about it a lot. I'm not good at selling myself or talking about myself, so I don't generally jump on opportunities like this. But I do really enjoy your podcast, so may as well put myself out there.
Well, there's so much to talk about too. You know, it's just a little bit one of the most, decorated skiers of all time, regardless of freestyle or alpine or anything like that. I mean, a 4-time Olympian, that is extremely impressive. And I think one of the more impressive things that kind of want to touch on and get into is that you were not early in the sport, especially nowadays. Everybody gets into sport, or it seems so much more like, okay, you're 10 years old, you're going to be a professional baseball player and you're going to do nothing else. Where you played soccer and you had all these different athletic kind of endeavors that you took up, and obviously enjoyed skiing and everything else. But freestyle was not a path that happened super early for you.
No, not at all. So I grew up in Vermont. I was the third of 4 kids, and we grew up doing all sorts of sports, but not competitive skiing at all. I played soccer and did gymnastics and was on a swim team and played softball. But we skied on the weekends whenever we could. My parents we lived about 20 minutes away from Bolton Valley. So my parents would just drop us off up there. And I have an older brother and sister who are 3 and 4 years older than I am. And then a sister who's 4 years younger than I am. So I was kind of grouped with the older brother and sister, and my mom would drop us off and they would head up and go skiing, and I'd kind of hang around the lodge, and we'd got $1 to buy a hot chocolate or something. So I'd milk that $1 and, figure out what I was going to buy that day. And there was a pizza place downstairs. So I'd go down there, and they had video games. And not a huge fan of skiing, kind of cold, didn't have, my brother and sister had kids their age that they were skiing with, and I didn't really have that. So, I'd ski a little, but just didn't really like it. And then eventually, when I was in 7th grade, we went away. My dad was on sabbatical from the University of Vermont. We went to Mexico City for the year. And when we got back in 8th grade, for some reason, I suddenly started liking skiing. And in high school, I met a group of friends that would ski on the weekends at Sugarbush North, and we could buy a ski pass. I think it was $155. So we'd go up there I know, right? So I'd go up there every minute I could with this group of buddies, and just started falling in love with skiing. And we didn't have a ton of money growing up, so I generally lived in hand-me-downs, and we didn't do things like tune skis. That was, was not on the radar at all. So I didn't have any edges, but I learned that you could slam into moguls to slow down, which of course every mogul coach, including me right now, is like, duh. But that's what I did, and I got really proficient at it. Like, I could go really fast, and I could, get down the hill. I didn't ever jump. That was way too scary. But so all through high school, my friends and I would just bomb around Sugarbush North and ski the moguls. We'd ski Upper FIS and Bravo and Encore, and I actually went back to Sugarbush North for the first time this past summer since college. And it is a teeny little ski area. I mean, it was this huge playground to me back then, but it's like, I think it has 4 lifts. It was pretty funny to go back there. But so then I went to college, and I was still playing soccer and skiing when I could in the wintertime. And that group of friends went to a nearby, they went to UVM and I went to Middlebury. And so we would meet up at Sugarbush and ski together. And it was still super fun, but I didn't do it quite as much. And then when I was a junior, World Championships for mogul skiing was at Lake Placid. Mm-hmm. So that was in I think it was 88. Okay. So a friend and I went over to check it out. And rather than be amazed, I was kind of like, oh, I can do this. I know I can do this. So when I graduated from college, at that point, I was playing soccer with Wanda Good, who is Jeff Good's younger sister. And Jeff Good was competing on the NORAM tour at that point and living in Steamboat. And so when he came home in the summertime, he would actually coach a little bit of soccer. And so he was my coach a little bit. And so I was talking to him about mogul skiing, and he was like, oh, you totally should do it. It's so fun. And Steamboat Springs Winter Sports Club is such a great place. And so it was kind of in the back of my mind, I can do this. So when I graduated from college, I decided I was going to just go for it and, be a ski bum / competitor and see where it went. And so in Colorado, the teams back then that I knew of were Winter Park and Steamboat and Telluride. And my sister lived in Telluride, so I knew I didn't want to go there. Mm-hmm. And Winter Park was a little too close to Denver for me, so I moved to Steamboat. And I knew Goody out here too, so that helped just to have a contact. Right. So I moved to Steamboat, joined the Winter Sports Club, met Park Smalley, and he was kind of like, you're how old and you want to do what? And you've never competed before. So he was pretty realistic. He was good though. He's like, okay, why don't you put a time limit on it so that you're not one of those people that is trying to ski for the rest of their life. So, so we said, okay, let's try to make the US team in 2 years. Okay. So I skied regionally for 2 years. The first year, let me back up. Back then, the way to make the US ski team was from US Nationals. That was your choice. Right. So you had to get basically top 4 at US Nationals if you wanted to make the team. Mm-hmm.
How old were you at this point? What's the age?
So I graduated college when I was 21.
So 21. Okay.
So the first year I competed regionally, and I was an alternate for US Nationals. The second year I competed regionally, and I made US Nationals, and I actually got 5th at US Nationals. So that was in 91. Okay. And so I made the development team. They had a much more robust development team back then. They were like, I'm trying to think of who else was on the development team. We probably had, 4 or 5 just girls on the development team, something like that. So, and that was the year in 1991 when they started selections, because 92 was going to be the first event in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So selections were at Snowbird and Alta. And so I drove over to, and again, I didn't, I was a cocktail waitress. I didn't have any money or anything, right? So I drove over to Salt Lake City. The rest of the people were staying up at the Cliff Lodge or the Wildflower or something like that. Okay. I crashed on a friend from college's couch in Salt Lake City and drove up to the ski area every day. And the first day we got like 3 feet of snow, and the second day we got like 2 feet of snow, and there was no course at all. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, I'm here to ski. I'm here to compete. I'm here to win this thing. Mm-hmm. And there's no moguls and there's no course. And that's when I met Donnie St. Pierre, who was a long-time US ski team coach. Mm-hmm. And great sense of humor, nothing ruffles his feathers. And, I was pretty intense. Like, this was my goal. I wanted to make the World Cup and make the Olympics. And, he's like, oh, let's go powder skiing. And I was like, I'm not going powder skiing. We gotta go train. We got to go train. Of course, there's nowhere to train. So anyway, long story short, I ended up winning I won one of them and got second in the other, and got the one spot available to go to the World Cup. Mm-hmm. And through the World Cups at Breckenridge, Lake Placid, and Whistler, I got the 4th spot to go to the Albertville Olympics in 1992. So
unbelievable. That drives. So where does that, like, you say intent, you have your goals, very driven, and where's that stem from? Is that mom and dad, like at an early age? Or, what was their impression when you're like, all right, I'm done with college, I think I'm going to move to Steamboat and give this whole skiing thing a go, even though I've never competed or given that a try?
They definitely got me and my siblings involved in sports from a young age. And that's what we did in our family. We did everything when we were little. We were on all the teams, and that was kind of my identity. Like, I like I said, I played soccer and I played softball and I did gymnastics, and that was what I did all through high school, and then skied on the weekends, and that was always the recreational thing. But it was also very competitive with my friends, like, you know, who's going to get to the bottom first. Like, a couple of them were ski racers, but not super serious, and they like to ski moguls too. So we just would be in the moguls skiing, and it was always like, you know, trying to outdo each other, and that's just what we did. And I think the Olympics I didn't grow up with the television, so we heard a lot about the Olympics and we watched a little bit of it, but we didn't really have, I mean, it wasn't on TV. So it wasn't, gymnastics was the big thing in my family.
Gotcha.
We knew a lot about Nadia Comaneci and Olga Korbut, and we followed that intensely, Mary Lou Retton. But skiing, you know, Bill Johnson was from then. So we, like the Mara brothers, like it was on our radar, but it wasn't, the Olympics at that point wasn't as big a deal as the US ski team. Like for me, I remember telling my dad one time, you know, I want to win the World Cup. I want to win the overall World Cup. And you know, I'm like, the Olympics is one race. And he was like, yeah, but it's the Olympics. It's a big deal. And but to me, that wasn't as big a deal as winning the overall World Cup, which I look back at it now and I'm like, well, maybe you should have changed your focus a little bit, because you did win the World Cup, but you never did win the Olympics. So, but anyway, so I think just being so involved in sports from a young age, always wanting to win that soccer game, always wanting to, you know, nail that routine on the balance beam. I had the drive. I wanted to be the best at whatever sport I did. And once I started skiing, I absolutely loved it, for one thing. Like I loved mogul skiing, not necessarily just going out and skiing, but mogul skiing was
specifically, it. Right.
And then once I got in the competitive circuit in Colorado, I just wanted to win. I wanted to win. And I worked my tail off. There's no doubt. I mean, I was on the hill every day, and I would be like, okay, I'm going to make 10 more runs before I go down. I mean, no joke. Like I would be after training, say, I'm going to go make 10 more runs. Like I look at that now and I'm like, holy mackerel. Like I definitely put in the time.
Right.
So I think just by the time I got to the World Cup, I still had that same mentality of I want to win. And I knew that too. And that was the era of Donna Weinbrecht. So she pretty much won everything all the time. And I really struggled with that, because I just couldn't figure out how to get better than she was. I mean, her natural touch in mogul skiing is unbelievable. And mine wasn't. I was big and strong and athletic, and it took a lot of fine tuning for me to get there.
Right.
And like I said, I trained my butt off, and that obviously helped, and it definitely honed my skills, but I didn't have that. I mean, I had some natural talent, obviously, or I wouldn't have made it as far as I did, but I didn't have, like, I would train so much more than Donna would, for instance, and she would beat me, and it drove me crazy. So I think, quite honestly, like that's what kept me going, is like, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to get better? And the one place that I did tend to do better was air and speed. With the gymnastics background, that definitely helped at that point. And also, you know, in the 90s, we weren't flipping, which it's just different. I don't think one is harder necessarily than the other. I think one's more intimidating than the other, but our courses weren't prepared. They weren't prepared as well as they are now for flipping.
Yeah, certainly. Yep.
You had to go bigger to do a triple. Like there's definitely, I mean, obviously people throwing cork 10s, that's a huge deal. But, you know, when people are like, oh, well, you didn't flip, I'm like, yeah, but we went pretty big, and we did, you know, I was on the forefront of the 360 and the, you know, like we definitely were pushing the limits. It was different though. There's no doubt about it. And no, I'd never flipped on snow. I have on water, but never on snow.
Yeah.
So I'm just talking. I don't really know, obviously, what I'm talking about. But so I think that drive was just that I wanted to be able to say I'm the best. So
now, was it more, I'm always curious on this, is it more of like the hating to lose, or just like had like the thrill? Like, did you like just hate, like, okay, Donna beat me, you know, lost here, and is that it? Or is it more of like you just love that thrill of getting the win and or was it just like more of like a relief, like, okay, I won, all right?
I think it was hating to lose. I think it was having to admit to myself that I wasn't the best one out there. And I only won 5 World Cups in my entire career. So I lost a lot.
Right.
But it definitely, it kept the drive going, and people say, oh, you need to do your best. You need to focus on yourself. Yeah, you're right. You do. But if you really, really want to win, you have to pay attention to what other people are doing too. And the difference between a red ribbon and a blue ribbon. So it's, it kept me going for sure.
No, and I think, that's super important, especially to like know yourself. And there's always, I think as it gets later into your career and knowing how, like, the difference in not maybe having as much talent or whatever, but be able to make up for that with the volume and the drive and the intensity and like putting in more work on the hill. And it pays off in different ways. I'm sure you were probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest girl out there when you're going out doing another 10, 15 runs. Like none of the other ladies are out there doing that.
For sure.
And that like, it's always one of those things you look at, like the beginning of a ski season or something else, your back's like super sore after you ski like a couple runs and everything. And then by the end of the season, obviously you're full, like, mogul back, which is really bad. Lower back pain doesn't really exist. It's totally gone because your body's used to it and kind of used to that impact and pounding and going through and putting that extra time in. It definitely makes a difference. And I think it not only, during your career, but later in life, it shows you the difference that you need to make in really what it takes if that's the best way to do it. Outwork everybody else, and then you kind of looking back. There's really, I guess you can say you really have no regret, right? You put in as much work as you possibly could, and it's hard. I'm sure there's always a couple here and there, but for the most part, one of the things I think that you touched on is true in my mind. The Olympics is a one-day thing and the spotlight is definitely on it, but I think it's much more impressive to be a World Cup overall champion where you have to go in, 10, 15 different stops and prove it throughout the end of the season that you are better than everybody else and you are more consistent. And especially back then, because courses were a lot more different than they are now. Where most of the courses are fairly same pitch, same consistency, but back then you had some of those courses like Breck and just super steep, Silver Fox and Snowbird, or Shiro, Japan. You had all these different places where it's just totally super steep, and then you'd show up to another course and it would be super flat, and you just really makes it a true World Cup overall champion. So I think that to do that a couple times is extremely impressive. 21 podiums, 5 wins, and then 4 Olympics is just absolutely insane. It's super impressive, and a lot of people just fight to try to get into one, and to see 4 and that consistency that built up. Especially for getting into it later in your career. Just super, super impressive. So for you, what was it like? What were some of those things that helped you, I guess, stay on focus and kind of keep your priorities in order for building out and continuing to kind of build out, some of just the main times skiing that, like, I need to get this better here. This is what the goal is. And how would you reach kind of achieving that, rather than just, I want to go out and I want to win.
So I grew up with no edges on my skis. So I didn't know how to carve a ski. I just didn't, right? We had straight skis back then. And I was like my biggest now nemesis of the person that would go ching, 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 totally like slide their currents downhill. So I had to actually return, despite being from Vermont, I had to learn how to edge when I moved to Colorado, which was kind of interesting. And I didn't really believe that I needed to learn to edge when I was skiing moguls, because I was like, look, I can crash into the mogul and slow down. What's the problem? I absorb and I roll over and I go. But obviously there's still skiers on the World Cup that are skiing super slidey, but I think you have better success, better control if you can get more of an edge. So I did eventually spend a ton of time skiing flats and learning how to make a GS turn. And that was actually later in my career, and it made a huge difference. Like, that's like, I was skiing my best skiing when I was 34 years old. I was skiing, most people have retired by then. I don't even think the US ski team lets you be on the team if you're that old anymore. Like I mean, I was one of the best in the world in my mid-30s, which is pretty crazy, but I attribute that to, really, really learning how to ski at a later, I mean, really, really learning what a ski can do, how to arc a ski. It made a huge difference. So that was the biggest thing.
Interesting. And so for those kind of out there, some of those younger kids maybe getting into sport, something like that along those lines, what would be a couple pieces of advice? I mean, would it be not to focus in on necessarily one sport, maybe try a few of them, because you definitely had quite a few, and I think that makes a well-rounded athlete for sure. And I think that fast muscle twitch, I mean, it kind of helps there, right?
Yeah, I mean, things are different now. I understand that, but I still am a huge believer in multi-sport athlete for your physicality as well as your mentality. I think throwing all your eggs in one basket for the entire year after year after year is really tough on kids. And yeah, they love it and they would just that's all they want to do. But if that's all they do, they don't know what they're missing. They don't know. I don't know. I am a huge fan of get your kids involved in as many things as you can at a young age. And it's hard as they get older. There's no doubt about it. I mean, my daughter's 16 right now and she still plays soccer, and it's hard. She missed 2 entire weeks of the high school season, which is a lot. But I think it also keeps her hungry to ski. And, when her team was still training a little bit the last couple of weeks, she definitely was like, oh, I can't wait to ski. I can't wait to ski. And, but I think it's so good. It stresses your muscles in different ways. It gives your brain a break. Just if you can keep your kid involved in at least another sport at an older age, like 16, for instance, I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's one of those things, especially, being around here in Park City, you definitely see the very young, like specialized camps. And it's like, well, we can do more than just that one thing. It doesn't have to be that at like 10, 11 years old. I mean, played football and tennis and did bunch of other stuff and cross training and loved all that. And it also, I feel like it gets you away, you get different friend groups, different people that you don't really get to see, and kind of creates those different connections that you can have for for the rest of your life, for sure.
Very important.
Yeah. So after you go through let's go back to 1992, and you kind of you get that last spot. I mean, what is that feeling? I mean, that's that goal. I mean, as you touched on, talking to Park Smalley and everything else, I'm going to go a couple years and let's see, and I'll put a cap on it. If not, I'll be out. And here you are, you've just qualified for the 1992 Olympics and you're headed off.
So am fairly introverted, kind of a homebody, which is kind of funny when people hear that. They're like, really? You traveled all over the world for years? Yeah, I know. But so we were in Lake Placid at the last World Cup before they named the Olympic team in 92. And they did it by place points. And so it was, there were like 4 of us, I think, going for that last spot. And they call you into a room. And they're like, okay, you're going or you're not, basically. So they said, you're going. And it was like so at this point, I have skied at Whistler, and that's the only World Cup I've ever skied in out of the country. I've only skied in 3 World Cups as it is, right? So I grew up about 2 hours from Lake Placid. So I went home and hung out at my house for a couple of days and just kind of chilled out. And then got on a plane, and we went to Germany. Oh my God, I'm totally Oberhoek, Germany for the World Cup before Albertville. And so that was my second international start, and it was great fun. That was fine. And then we got to the Olympics, and we went through the processing where they give you everything you can imagine. I mean, everything from a bathrobe to snow boots to, I actually still have a pair of dark blue tall Uggs that I got at the 92 Olympics. I walked my dog in them, but everything you can imagine, 2 giant duffel bags. And then we went up to Teen France, which everybody else on the team had been to, but I hadn't, because I'd never skied in France.
Right.
And checked into our place, and when you walked up the stairs and down the hallway, there were boxes of M&Ms that you could take. So every time you went by, you would take M&Ms, like M&Ms. Like, these are the things I remember from the Olympics, right? So that Olympics, I was lucky enough to have 4 different experiences. So I could, that was the only Olympics I knew at that point. M&Ms was a big one. And we stayed up at Teen the whole time. So we weren't in the Olympic Village and we weren't around other sports. And in order to get to Albertville, it was a 2-hour bus ride down. And then it was a 2-hour whatever bus ride up another canyon to another event. So we didn't actually see that many other events. We went to Albertville a couple times, to the Olympic Village down there. And a couple other, we went to we saw Hillary Lynn win a medal in slalom, and we went to, Val d'Isere was right over the other side of Teen. So we did actually go, I think Liz McIntyre and I went over to Val d'Isere and watched some of the men's downhill, which was kind of fun. But it wasn't like this crazy celebration of sport for me, because we weren't with all the other athletes. We were with the Mogul athletes in Teen France. So, but the opening ceremonies actually was the crazy. I'd never seen an opening ceremonies at that point. Walking into that arena, and
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And then the show, I didn't even know there was like the big show with all these. That was when they did all this bungee jumping, and people were rollerblading around in crazy costumes, and that was a big experience for sure. I will remember that for the rest of my life. But so I fell on my butt on the 4th turn out of the gate at the Olympics. I'm embarrassed to say. So the competition part, I don't like to remember too much, but then we, skied the rest of the World Cup. And then that year at nationals, so 92 nationals, I got 4th. And this is a little confusing, but so you had to get top 4 at nationals to make the US team, but the top 2 people from the World Cup already had spots. So if one of them didn't get in the top 4, then you had to be higher than 4th. So Donna won, and Liz, who was ranked 2nd for the US on the World Cup, got like 6th. So she was out. So I actually needed to be in the top 3 in order to get a spot. So I was put back on the development team.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Devastating.
Yeah.
Almost quit.
Really?
It was, yeah. Cause I was back. I mean, back then the development team had a different color uniform, and you didn't get any funding. It was brutal. So, and I was ranked 10th in the world at that point also. Didn't matter because I didn't do well enough at nationals, even though I got 4th. So that year I had to go back to selections, which the selections that year were actually in Canada. Don't ask, I don't know. So I drove my car from Colorado up through Glacier National Park all the way to Calgary. And we had at Fortress Mountain. Have you heard of Fortress Mountain? It was this little mountain up there. So there was it was weird. So we had 1 day of selections and 1 day was a NORAM. So that's the only NORAM I ever skied in, actually. And I won. And so I got my World Cup starts again, drove back home and got to ski World Cup after Christmas. And from there I qualified high enough in the North American World Cups to be able to continue on the tour. And then that year I won nationals. And so then I was on the team for the rest of the time.
Gotcha.
So that was 93.
I mean, it seems like a lot of perseverance. It's always a word that I love to use. And I mean, it just seems not only at that point in your career, but I mean, several different times. I mean, the devastation of not getting the spot that you want at nationals, and then you have to go back and you have to go back to the drawing board and continue to keep clawing your way back and kind of fighting and really solidifying that spot. I mean, what was that? I was curious, what was that kind of pressure like going through? I mean, is that something that you enjoyed or something that you wouldn't enjoy? I mean, knowing that like, okay, got to do well here. I mean, is that something you would really think about, or is it just, I got to go out and compete and I just want to win?
I never really felt, interestingly enough, I didn't put a ton of pressure on myself ever. I knew that I wanted to win, and I knew that I had to ski really well in order to do it, but it wasn't like, I didn't ever really feel it like totally stressed out pressure. Okay. Which is kind of interesting when I think about it. And the other thing that I never did is I never had expectations that I would ski really well. Like I really wanted to win, but I guess expectations might not be the right word. I never had the confidence that I was going to ski really well. Like I never had a ton of confidence in my game. And like I said, I trained really hard. I was, first one on the hill, last one off the hill. And I mean, I think from my results, it's safe to say I was a pretty good skier, but I never felt like I'm the best skier out here. I never had any sort of swagger. I just never really had a ton of self-confidence. And I look back and I think, obviously, words are words, but when I look back at Salt Lake, and why I couldn't get a medal there. And I think the one thing is I just didn't have that extra level of belief that I could, and it kind of kills me when I'm like, I'm in the start gate at the Olympics. I qualified second. I had everything going for me, but I just didn't take I just didn't take that belief to the next level and be like, have the attitude of, this is mine, I got this. And I've thought about that a lot. And, physically I was all there, but mentally, I just don't think I believed. It's interesting.
It's super tough. I mean, it's crazy. It's one of those things. I mean, confidence is definitely one of those keys. And I mean, it's interesting to hear. I mean, reeling off all the accomplishments and everything else, but I mean, that is one of the most infuriating things about the mind. I mean, you believe what you believe, whether it's true or not. It's what you believe and what kind of what you think. And that's it's super interesting on the because I mean, you would imagine that confidence is always tough though, because it's the hardest thing to get and it's the easiest thing to lose. So I think
I never had the confidence to be able to talk a big game and then have the confidence to support the big game. So I didn't want to talk the big game if I wasn't going to.
Gotcha. Interesting.
I wasn't going to perform, and I wasn't confident enough to know that I could perform. So I couldn't really balance those things out. So I never really got to the level where I was super confident in what I brought to the table.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Like I still, even so, when goal setting and stuff, I always had a hard time goal setting because I didn't want to not achieve that goal.
Right.
And I've actually talked to, all right, when I was skiing, I would talk to a lot of people about that. We talk about all this goal setting, but what if I don't achieve that? Because they never really tell you what to do if you don't achieve that goal, other than, oh yeah, you just set new goals. Well, yeah, but what about, I mean, that's a pretty big hit to not achieve that goal. Does that mean that I underperformed? Does that mean that my goal was set too lofty? Does that mean, what exactly does that mean? And how do I get over that? And it's an interesting, I don't think enough is spent thinking about that. And I mean, even after the Olympics, when I retired, they invite you to go, kind of what's next, like, what are you going to do with yourself now? Now you're an Olympic athlete, now you're entering the real world. And I remember I was at this one, and they had all the panelists that were up there talking about, what comes after the Olympics were all people that had won Olympic medals. So I raised my hand and I said, you guys all achieved your goals, but I didn't. So, what's my, how do I move on from this? You guys have, you got your, you put in all this time and work and got your Olympic medal, but, I put in arguably more time and work than you guys did, and I didn't. So, right. and I got shut down. It was really interesting.
Really?
Yeah. There was no discussion about it. It was all about, the Olympics is so great. And you're an Olympian and you can move, this is the best thing ever. And it's like, well, now that there's all this talk about athletes and depression, and it's so real. It's so real. Yeah. There's only a couple people that win medals. What about the rest of the people that have dedicated their whole life to this? It's really interesting.
Yep. Yeah. Just go back to work. Just go back to
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's super interesting because that's always how it is, right? There's only one winner. There's only three of those medals they give out in each discipline. So makes it tough. I mean, for you, obviously you went to 4 different Olympics, and each Olympics I'm sure had a completely different experience and vibe to it. And what was your overall, what was the most valuable, I guess, lessons? If you could try, there's probably, going to be more than one, but I mean, takeaways, not only from that, just from, I guess we'll start with just those different Olympics. What's like a few of your main takeaways that you really, looking back, can embrace?
Okay, so 92, it was opening ceremonies. Like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And it was, the volume of Olympic memorabilia that you got and that I still have. That was 92. I mean, that was just like great. Like, that was so eye-opening to me. Like, I had no idea. Mm-hmm. Then 94 was Lillehammer, which was kind of what I thought of when I thought of Olympics. Everybody stayed at the Olympic Village. It was freezing cold and white and snowy and very pure, and still the Coca-Cola signs, but just much mellower and much more serene. And the course was just perfect. And everything was right there. Like, the Nordic track went up up behind the jumps, and the Mogul course and the jumps were right next to the freestyle venues. And
really cool.
It was just really, really cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Japan was just crazy. It was just, that whole experience was just, I mean, I'd been to Japan many times before that. So I knew how crazy they were for mogul skiing. They loved mogul skiing. And then to bring in every other sport too with the whole Olympics, it was just extremely enthusiastic people there, for sure. So it was pretty, like, there you really felt like a celebrity because people actually knew who you were. So that was kind of interesting in a sport like mogul skiing, where, you kind of can fly under the radar. And then Salt Lake, I wasn't quite as excited for Salt Lake because I was like, it's in my home country. Everyone's speaking English. It's stuff that I know. And, mm-hmm. But it ended up being maybe one of my favorite Olympics. It was right after 9/11 also. So we were kind of not even knowing what was going to happen and if it was going to happen. And it ended up being a really, really fun Olympics. And I knew it was my last Olympics. So I really tried to participate in everything I could. I went to a million events. I did all this, went to parties, and, I rode on the wagon through Salt Lake City behind the Budweiser Clydesdales, which was totally awesome. Just like, just soaked it all in. And that was probably my favorite course that I ever skied was the Deer Valley Olympics. It was just a really fun, cool experience. I have really fond memories of that Olympics, for sure.
Now, for each Olympics, did you have different expectations or goals, or kind of, I mean, obviously the first Olympics didn't go quite the way you planned. Fourth turn, take a little squat, things don't go quite so well. I mean, coming back a couple years later in 94, is it, okay, I just want to get down this time, or is it like, I want to win?
So 92 was survival. There's no doubt. That was just get through this and then get me home. I don't know what we're doing here. 94 was the first time that I had done okay. I mean, I hadn't been on the podium or anything yet. So it wasn't like I wasn't going in with expectations of winning, but I was skiing well. I was one of the top 5-6 girls. Mm-hmm. So it was the first time that I felt the media pressure, and training there were cameras and there were people, and it really freaked me out. And I didn't really handle it very well. It wasn't all about me. All of a sudden it was about me trying to figure out what's going on around me. And I'm not just skiing. I'm not just training. Like, I'm training with an audience. And that was really, right. I really struggled with that a lot. 98, I was actually ranked first going into the Olympics. And the week before, we had a World Cup at Breckenridge on Mock. Mm-hmm. And I won the first run, and in training between runs, I cartwheeled from the top air to the bottom air, knocked myself out, got up, brushed myself off, got back on the lift, got off the lift, couldn't remember which way the mogul course was, waited till somebody got off the course with a bib on, followed him to the top of the mogul course, got in the gate for my run, and packed it in on my second air. Oh. And was promptly taken over to Vail to get a CAT scan, and they deemed me fine. And so the next morning we had a 6 o'clock flight to Japan. Wow. out of Denver. So I got to Japan. I was scared to ski. I was sore from head to toe. I was ranked #1 in the world. I mean, it was a disaster. So I ended up, I think I ran in quals second to last. And I made a mistake. I had like a slip on like the snow was really packed. Still to this day call it Japan snow. It was like, it was warm and really packy. And you know, that snow that,
yep.
So I slipped out a little bit and I was in 16th place, and Candice Gilg, who was ranked second in the world, was right behind me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not even going to make finals. So she ended up falling also. So I made finals in the 16th spot, and, you know, I skied okay, but that was that. So I ended up 10th there. So that was reasonably devastating for sure. And
do you any it's so funny now, with how much the world has changed when it comes to concussions and all that stuff. Slightly ring your bell, and you know, compared to now. I mean, do you remember like having being dizzy at all on the court when you were going through training and everything else? Because it sounds like it's a pretty quick turnaround to be right at right to Nagano.
I just know that I had no interest in skiing when I got to Nagano. I mean, gotcha. I was mentally a disaster. I was physically so sore. I didn't fall that much. I had taken 2 huge crashes, and just was scared to ski. Like this was not me at all. So that was tough. That was definitely tough. And I had expectations on me, right? Mm-hmm. You go in first in the world, that's a big deal. So that was tough.
But after that, I mean, you really rebounded, and I mean, the next year you're the World Cup overall champion, which I know was one of those goals that you'd set about trying to accomplish.
I think I set my career was basically built around the '98 Olympics, to win the Olympics and sail off into the sunset. And when I didn't, suddenly I had no expectations. I had no nothing. I was just skiing for the fun of skiing, and so I was gonna retire after '98. Mm-hmm. And I went to my first training camp, and it was like a whole different deal. Like it was skiing for skiing and having fun, and it was awesome. And I was skiing really well. And so I went to my next training camp, and I was like, this is I love skiing. This is so much fun. So I decided I wasn't gonna retire. And I went into that season skiing better than ever, great attitude, just, showing up to ski. And I ended up winning the world championships that year, the World Cup moguls, and I won nationals and in singles and dual moguls that year, actually, on champion.
I was there. I remember.
You were a little grommet.
I was a little grom. Travis Cabral won the singles. You dominated on the ladies side. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So that was a big year. And then it was like, well, okay, I just won that. Am I really going to retire now? So then I decided to ski again the next year, and I ended up winning the World Cup overall that year as well. And then I was like, well, Olympics is only 2 years away. May as well stick around. So,
that big difference. It sounds like there's definitely like a mindset change after '98, and just, okay, you kind of just take a breath, and the pressure, or the tension, or whatever that is, just kind of, the air's let out of the balloon, and then you just go out, and it's back to being in Vermont, just banging into those bumps, having fun with your friends, trying to race to the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, exactly. It was much more fun, whereas it had become more of a job and more of a, I said earlier that I didn't put a ton of pressure on myself, but it was just kind of, maybe it was my expectation that going into '98, this is the way it's going to go. This is what my career is going to do. And then after that ended, it was like, okay, it's a whole new world now. Now I can just go out and ski. Mm-hmm. So.
Super. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how much those changes happen, and how they make all the difference in the world, because clearly the talent and the drive and the work ethic and that stuff, propelled you to enormous heights in the sport for sure. And so it's good to see that, you go out and have a little bit of fun. And was it the same? So I'm curious, after '98, was it still that same intensity, and still the same work, like, okay, I'm going to put in another 10-15 runs after? It was like, you know what, training's done, I'm good for the day, we'll get back. I've kind of, how much of that is taking inventory and kind of learning from your past, and like, all right, I've reached this spot, I'm in a good place, I kind of know what I need to do moving forward?
No, I never reached that spot. No, I never reached it. No, like I said, I never really I never banked on all the years I'd put in. I always just was, I was a doer. I had to, the only confidence that I got from any of my training was that I had done more than anybody else. So I was a doer all the way to the bitter end.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm paying for it now, but that's what I did. That was my, that was the way that I could show up in the gate with my best package, was knowing that I'd put in that work.
No, it's interesting, because some people are definitely, that's how their mind, that's what, gives you that confidence. Right. And for some people, comes in different ways, and that totally makes sense. Makes a lot of sense for sure. Now, through, obviously your career and everything else, who are some of those people, other than mom and dad, that kind of helped propel or create the monster?
I think I had a soccer coach in high school that I always just kind of admired him. He just made us put in the work every day. Like, we'd have a full practice, and then he'd be like, okay, you're on the line, we're doing sprints at the end. And that kind of set me up for, okay, you do this level that everybody else does, but we're going to do more. And that's, I think, where that mindset of, I got to always do more came in. And then Park, he was an unbelievable influence in my skiing career. When I moved to Steamboat, he was, I think he was still coaching the US team, because he wasn't really around that much, but he was in charge of he was the program director at Winter Sports Club. And I got to know him over the next few years, skiing at Steamboat. Like I said, he really wasn't here that much. But then when I made the US team, he became just an amazing resource for me. Obviously he'd been traveling with the US team. He knew the way the whole system worked, which I didn't know anything about. And but he really just believed in me, even though I was pretty old when I got going. And he said some things to me that just always, that have all, like, I still use today with the kids that I coach. Like, you have 2 ears for a reason. If you don't like it, it goes in one ear and out the other. And I remember in '94 when I was really struggling with training in the media, and he slipped me a piece of paper, and I still have it somewhere. But just control your emotions, believe in yourself, you're the best. And it was just a really basic thing of just reminding me that, you got this. And he had my back. And he was the first person I called when I won world championships in '99 from Switzerland. And I didn't get him. I left him a message, but still, just his demeanor, and he's very calming. And I just feel like he always knew what to say. So he definitely brought me along through. Even though he wasn't really around at the end of my career, he definitely, I still talk to him, and he just had a huge impact on me.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of those lessons from skiing that you still kind of use today? And obviously, with a little bit of coaching, you have some of those lessons you can use and you have some of the wisdom you've gotten from Park and other people, but just over the course of your career, that maybe not only in skiing, but just kind of some of those lessons that you use in life.
The biggest one, and I share it frequently with my kids, my athletes, is training doesn't count. It doesn't have to be there today. The only run that matters is your competition run. So if you're having a tough day training, it's okay. Well, so-and-so is landing that air so well, Have confidence in your plan, have confidence in yourself. It doesn't matter. That run was not your competition run. So, trying to get them to move, put those things behind them and get in a proper mindset for their competition run. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I try to get my athletes to realize, and to have confidence, like, not to be able to get sunk down or sucked down by other people skiing well in training. Just doesn't matter, like building them up so that they can perform their best when it's time. Mm-hmm. And that was something that through the course of my career, I was not a good trainer. I never won training. I was a competitor.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Training didn't always happen.
No. Very few top to bottom runs in my training career.
Well, that's good it's good to know that you can bring it all together. And how are you I mean, the coaching aspect, that's got to be nice and rewarding on a different, you get to influence, and you don't get to hurt the body as much anymore. You know, there's still a little bit, you know, that lower back gets a little bit sore standing on the course, but
A lot of shoveling.
a lot of shoveling too. Yeah. But, you know, it's nice to be able to, it's got to be great to be able to, you know, kind of give back to the sport and everything else. I mean, Steamboat is certainly one of the meccas and main programs in the country, and always producing great talent.
It is. It's been really fun to be involved with these guys, and you know, Mogul is obviously an individual sport, but it's always been important to me to have a sense of team. And I've worked with some of these athletes since they were U13s or something like that, and to see them have how bonded they are, and you know, growing through the sport. And then this year, I mean, so I had a group of 10 girls at U15.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's really only 4 of them left, but to see them like welcoming the younger kids in, and to see them last year getting really tight with some of the Rocky kids, and then this year getting tight with the Park City kids is really, really cool. And to see the supportive, just the support they give each other. And now it's even extending to other teams too. I think it's awesome. It's so cool. I love it.
It is cool. It's definitely a different dynamic, because it was definitely not there. It was definitely much more, and I don't know if it was like, I don't know if it was more competitive is like the right term, but it just definitely seemed more cutthroat, because it is like an individual sport, and it's such a hard dynamic. There are not many other sports like it where it's really you, but then you're also on a team, right? Yeah. So you're on this club, and then you have other people that you're kind of friends with. Some of them you actually are friends with, and then you got to try and support them, but then at the same time you want to kick their ass,
you want to beat them. Yeah.
Then I mean, it creates, and then then you don't kick their ass, or you do, and then it leads to quiet car rides, and you know, there's so many different dynamics that kind of go into it. It's you know, it's interesting from an athlete's perspective, but then definitely on the coaching side, you get to look at that, and you're like, a lot of different personalities in the sport, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then the other thing that I always try to get my kids on board with is that they need to learn how to be their best coach, and they need to be skiing and have the drive for them, not for me. Like, I don't want them to be out skiing to impress me. That's not what it's all about. I'm their coach. I'm there to support them. I'm there to help them achieve their goals, but I want them to be their goals. I don't, you know, it's not my experience. It's not my journey. It's their journey. So, you know, own your journey, and you'll get out of it what you put into it, but you need to make that decision.
Yeah. And I think that's really super important, because it's one of those things that kids, especially, you know, every run needs to be iPadded. Everyone needs to be seen. Every run did you watch it? No, I missed it. How was it? Well, I don't know how it was. How do you not know how it was? You just skied it. You just did it. You just performed it. How are you not aware? And that's certainly one of those things, I think, with social media and TikTok and everything else, that attention span is so short. It's like, are you even paying attention when you're actually in the middle of like skiing and doing your thing? Like, are you, or, you know, whatever it is, it's like, you're paying attention, right? Because I'm not paying, I can't be paying attention for you all the time. So I think that ownership is definitely super important. And I think it makes them probably, you know, it should at least make you care more, you know, if you're really owning it and you're really putting in the work. And if you aren't, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Or maybe, I mean, you shouldn't be relying on me to have how that run was. You need to feel it. You need to know it. You need to see, I mean, it needs to be your whole body experience, you know, and I'm here to help, but it's not all about me at all. So it is interesting. And some kids handle it a lot better than other kids do. Mm-hmm. But it's
how much is that switch from, because that's another interesting kind of dynamic when you go from being the athlete to kind of being the coach. And one of those things, like, at least looking back on my career, and one of the reasons why I don't think I was as successful as I could have been, is I just wasn't selfish enough. And on some level, when you get into skiing or everything else and you go up to totem pole, you just have to, you know, it has to be about you. It has to be that selfish nature. And, I don't think that's one of those things that's really talked about, because in the rest of the world, that's, the rest of life, that's not really a good thing to kind of be that selfish and everything else. But it is one of those things. And that's kind of important. You got to make sure that you have your priorities in order as you start to move into that higher performance realm and everything else of where you want to go, that there is a certain amount of selfishness. But for you, I mean, you go from that and then going into coaching is that little bit of pullback there. And then, it's about creating a fun team environment. And then you have so many different personalities and so many different athletes you got to try and keep track of.
Yeah, no, it's very true. You do have, I mean, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but you do have to, be selfish in certain aspects. You have to be selfish, in your training. You have to be selfish in your dryland training. You have to be selfish of when you want to go to bed and that you're eating well. And there has to be these things that have to matter to you enough that you're willing to go against what everybody else is doing or whatever. Like those are those sacrifices, right? You have to be able to, prioritize yourself and what you consider to be the things that are going to allow you to have success, or at least help you have success. And you have to be a team player, but you have to put yourself first. And the team will travel together and the team will do stuff together, but there are a lot of situations where you need to decide how you're going to handle that for yourself and what's going to make you the most successful that you can be, for sure.
Absolutely. How is the one thing I just wanted to touch on or ask for some of those people or skiers out there that are having some of those down periods, down times. We touched on a little bit with that perseverance, but what would be a little bit of words of wisdom as they're navigating, maybe rehabbing some injuries or trying to get things back on track? Maybe they didn't have the best season they were looking for or anything else. I mean, what were some of those things that kind of always helped you?
So for me, it's consistency in what I do. And for me, it's always been about dryland training. Like even to this day, I mean, I quit competing 20 years ago, and I still am super consistent about doing some sort of athletic endeavor every day. And that grounds me. And it puts me in a good mood. And it just that's my meditation time. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm out for a hike or I'm at the gym or I'm on a bike ride or whatever, excuse me. That's my selfish time that I, kind of revitalize myself. So obviously if you're a competitive athlete, you are going to be on a roller coaster. There's going to be goods and there's going to be bads. But if you can figure out that consistent thing that always grounds you and gets you back to, in your mindset of reminding yourself that who you are. Like if you're on a really high, you really aren't that super high person. You're just, that's just that day of what's happening. Yep. You still need to be that grounded person. And if you're having a really crappy day or a really crappy season or whatever, getting to that level, okay, this is what keeps me. And I think that's one thing that's always helped me through down times and up times, is just having that consistent, let me get my workout in, and it's going to help my mind so much. Mm-hmm. So, maybe it's for some people, they read a book. Maybe it's for some people, they go for a run. I don't know. But for me, it's always been doing something athletic that just kind of, gets my endorphins going a little bit and just mellows me out.
Gotcha. Makes sense for sure. Get those endorphins going. Yeah. Well, Ann, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you got some other stuff to get to, and really appreciate it, though. I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Bobby. Nice to talk to you.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and have a good one.